Our second presenter today is quite an accomplished gentleman. His name is Graeme Hopkins. Now, Graeme is sort of like a double threat. He's not only a registered landscape architect, but he's also a registered architect. And he is also very busy being a research fellow at the Zero Waste Center of Sustainable Design and Behaviour at Uni SA. He's also the principal of Fifth Creek Studio, and since the 1980s, he's developed expertise within water-sensitive urban design and implementation. And he has a particular focus on microclimate modification through the use of living architecture technologies, which he'll give us a little bit more insight on today. And to top it all off, it says right here that you received a Churchill Fellowship in 2005, so lots of accolades coming his way. Now, another big part of Graeme's accomplishments is he's basically written a book on green infrastructure or living architecture for Australia. So we're definitely very honored to have him here tonight to share his wisdom, and I'll let him do the rest of the talking.
Well, it's good to be here talking in Adelaide about this topic, which is where I started from. As you heard there, I've been doing things, and another thing on top of all that, I'm trying to be semi-retired. So you can see life is busy at times. This is just a scale work that I've done in the past with my partner Christine Goodwin, and she is co-author of the book. And we've worked there, and it was nice to see Riverland wineries here, because there's the Riverland at the Berry Information Centre that we designed, and we've worked a lot in the Riverland, and I recognise that vineyard from some of those photos. What is living architecture? Living architecture is landscape on structure, whether it's on a vertical wall, on a sloping roof, or in the top image there, that's a building in China. It's actually bringing back green space or nature back into the city. It can be a vertical wall like the far image in Sydney, 1 Bly Street. It softens and changes the microclimate in the urban canyon there. Or on the left here, it's an interior building in Singapore, in Cecil Street. It's a renovation of a building, and Google have got an office there, and a number of other high-tech industries are there. What's important is now cities are becoming a lot denser, and because of that we're losing vegetation and biomass and impervious surfaces. So therefore the cities heat up, and just some of these figures here. In 2050 the population's going to be 9 billion, 75% of that population will live in cities. Australia, 89% of Australia's population live in an urban environment. So therefore the city is really important to the future. It's people like you who come here to listen about what can happen in a city are going to make it more livable during the future, and actually demand the policy makers to do something about it. Like for instance, 10% increase in green cover lowers the city temperature by one degree. And there's numerous studies. New South Wales in Department of Environment have come up with a similar study or computer modelling that we can actually estimate what greenery will do of reducing temperatures. Temperature is the major problem of cities life now. Heat waves are the greatest natural disaster in Australia. More people die of heat stress than any bushfire or floods happen. So the emergency services have recognised this. Government policy makers are a bit slow on the uptake. All living architecture projects should have more than just one driver. It's just not a cosmetic Photoshop green on a building or on top of a building. You just don't put living architecture techniques there. They've got to satisfy at least 2 or 3 of these issues here, and I've just identified tonight we're talking about bringing nature back to the urban areas, and here as we're looking at open space increase the evapotranspiration, which is mainly through vegetation but through soil, in increasing biodiversity, wildlife habitat, food production. We heard a bit about that earlier tonight, and the visual amenities, the actual connection, the psychological connection, the health benefits that come from viewing natural vegetation and natural systems, and the urban designer, how to design that in. There are other things like maintaining the CO2 and oxygen balance, microclimates, any one of those issues there I could talk on for the night, but we'll just pick some of these. Green roofs that we consider are now urban forms. Any shape can be achieved, the technology's there, the practicalities are there. We can do domes like the California Museum or Parliament House. People forget that Parliament House in Canberra is a big green roof. I've been into some controversy with flippant comments of ripping up the lawn and putting it into native everlasting flowers, and you know that created a good stir in the press in Canberra, but it won't happen because none of that will ever change. But they can be recreation gardens. This is Hocking Place, a building, a housing building. On the far side, that's a garden on the 6th floor of a legal building in London, and it's used for part of their outside breakout areas, their social activities, lunchtime and so on. Or the residential scale. The one on the left is in Sydney on top of a 3-storey old Bond building that's been converted into residences, and this green roof has become the local park for the residents. But it's bringing this natural landscape right into the heart of Darling Harbour, and on the far side people might recognise that the Grange public toilets, that's a sand dune burying a toilet block. Or it can be on a large scale. This is in Singapore, people probably know this, but in Singapore, the Singapore Housing Trust are now linking their residential towers at midpoint and at the top of their buildings up to 80 floors high with these sky bridges, and they're now having sky gardens up there, playgrounds for the community, and Janelle's natural play could happen on the 40th floor. But they also are doing food production at that level. So they're actually producing food for the residents within the building at 80 floors up, 40 floors and so on. So the technology's there, it's just a means of doing it. We look at living walls in urban spaces, and we talk about that as the urban texture, the surface of this. The zoo here on the left you recognise. This is a museum in in Paris, it's fairly famous, Patrick Blanc's world. Or on the commercial side, these are residential tower on the left here in Singapore, where all through that building there's gardens and gardens connecting and vegetation climbing from floor to floor. So every apartment has an aspect of looking at the vegetation. So there's this psychological and health connection with vegetation, whether you're on the 6th floor or on the 66th floor. The image on the right is in Sydney. This was the experimental wall for the One Central, the big building near Central Station that you will see if you go to Sydney. It's the biggest, highest green wall in the world at the moment. This was their test one on a residential apartment block in the city. Or domestic scale, which we say is 1 to 4 stories. This is down at Mount Gambier, the art gallery entry. It's part of the construction of a green wall. And this green wall is part of the urban design. It's the cornerstone around the urban space and the cave gardens, but it also was screening the glass wall that faced west on the art gallery. So we were able to modify the climate during the building as well as produce something outside for the community. Or on the domestic scale, these little domestic shelter sheds that could be in anybody's backyard or front yard. They're really simple. So when you start thinking about it there, this is a simple diagram of what we're trying to say in there. The top number 1 there is a block of land before we develop it. Number 2 is you put a house on it, and there's about a quarter to a third of the space is your backyard. And this is what we've been used to. A lot of us grew up with these big backyards. But then if you suddenly decide to tilt that backyard up vertically, you've got this space left over. You still have the same amount of biomass that you had in a flat backyard. It's a bit hard kicking a football or playing cricket up there, but you probably could if you're on a rope or something. But you can actually put in another building, and this is what's happening in the suburbs. We're doing 2-for-1s, cramming it up. But what they're forgetting to do is actually put the vegetation back. So if you put a green roof, a vertical wall on those buildings, you actually have more vegetation biomass than you started with pre-development. So density isn't the big evil. The evil is we're not addressing the vegetation. So if we have density and we want to dense it up, cities have to dense it up to survive in a changing climate. We need to actually put vegetation there so that we can actually have food gardens on top of your building, on your balconies. You can have green walls, can be productive walls or just amenity walls. So this is what you do when you tilt up your backyard. You have a sloping roof on your bedroom. So we built this at our place just to prove the point. And I get up there and play up there on a harness and a rope. think I'm 18 and I'm rock climbing, hoping the rope doesn't break. But I do my weeding, and the biodiversity is incredible by the selection of plants. The tall plants there are correas. This winter, all the New Holland honeyeaters have been up there because they've been flowering and nothing else in the gardens flower. So it's maintained food source for some species. Again, this is a project that was done a number of years ago. It's the Marion GP Plus. It was a green roof up on 3rd floor, and we made it a urban agriculture roof. This was driven by a project developer who was looking after people who were at risk, and actually grew a vegetable garden in the backyard of one of their offices. When the new buildings come, we picked up that backyard and transplanted it up in the middle of this office building. This was highly successful. It actually proved the point that any office building or residential high-rise can actually have a productive garden there that produced food that was cooked in the kitchen there. It was part of a whole preventative health system. But unfortunately, the project manager moved to another state and the whole system's been scrapped. Yeah. Who knows why, but these things happen. Again, looking at the urban agriculture here on the left, this is the top of the roof of the car park to the West Australian Art Gallery. It's actually the forecourt to the gallery. This was a structured 1960s style landscape. I'm going to have to go over. And they've had that. So the other issue is how do we connect all this through a city? And I think this is important. We looked at bush tops, the cities, the rooftops of part of the old ecosystem of the city and linking them through. And I just looked, when I looked at this drawing, this was started in 2005 to get the Adelaide City Council and the state government to do something through the CBD, because there was original migration patterns for insects and birds through there, and we wanted to do that. It's now 2015, it's no further advanced, unfortunately. So we're looking at, we need to create open space, new open space within a city, and green roofs and living walls do that. There's a building built in Singapore by Kenyang. It has a continuous landscape ramp all the way from the ground to the top. It's 1.5 kilometres long. There's more landscape space than site area, 108%. Now they're actually approving buildings in Singapore. There's 600% landscape to the site area. So we can do this, and we need to do this. In Adelaide, the apartments started to do that by little gardens at the end of each of the corridors and the benefits you can see there. So that's a start in there. And in Japan, the city was broke. They sold a bit of their parkland like one of our squares. The architects were smart enough, and the developer, and produced the same biomass in plan form to what was there, and it's public accessible, plus you have a building that goes with it. Again, in Sweden, the big shopping centres, the roofs are now becoming urban parks. That's 5 hectares of urban park on top of, say, Marion or somewhere. We can do that, and it's practical. This is just some research we did to actually support what we're doing. Here's a insulation design tool that we developed here in Adelaide. It's the world's first. Again, we did work on green walls to get the energy efficiency through to the buildings, taking CO2 out of the air in a 9-metre high wall. There we can take 11% CO2 out of that urban structure. So this is where we look at the microclimate of cities. We use these technologies, this research, and on the left, this is a city canyon typical of Adelaide. On a 40-degree day, the buildings of about 46 on the facade, the road surf, the pedestrian area at the bottom's 44. If we put a hybrid green wall on that surface, we can reduce that that pedestrian temperature by 10 degrees. This is all by the research we've done. They're all figures that have been developed here in Adelaide. We can reduce the solar energy into the building by 700 watts per square metre, which is just amazing. But anyway, I'm running out of time, and I have. And nature on top of one of our experimental roofs was on the 22nd floor of the ANZ house, and this was a peewee up there. There was a family of peewees. They were chasing moths that land there at night, and the plant behind you see, that was a myoporum. It's got little yellow flowers, and bees were flying up there, and it's just incredible. Because I know the bees work in there, because in Chicago, the town hall has a bee farm up there, and the mayor gives away Chicago town hall honey to all the VIP people. And I just have this image of these little bees in their jumpsuits coming to the edge of the building and go, yahoo! Thank you.